On Tuesday evening, I was having a conversation with one of the students at FAME. FAME is one of our major building partners. They do arts work with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I often run into students at FAME in the hallway and we get chatting about one thing or another. And on Tuesday evening, I was chatting with a guy who I'm going to err on the side of confidentiality and give him the name Tom. On Tuesday evening, I was chatting with Tom, and we were talking about things that folks talk about, the weather, and they've got an upcoming show, and the joy of singing. When abruptly Tom said to me, "You're a good guy, Martin." And friends, I was very nearly undone. I very nearly started weeping when he said those words to me. Why? Well, part of it is that Tom had inadvertently echoed my father's final words to me when he was dying a year ago, and in a delirium that I would go to see him in the hospital, and sometimes the conversations were clearer than others. And one of the last things, or perhaps the very last thing, he said to me was, "You're a good guy." My father was deeply allergic to church, so this was as close as I was going to get from him as like a benediction or a closing blessing. I'm grateful for those words. But there's more reason than that that Tom's words moved me so much. I think him telling me, "You're a good guy," moved me as much as it did because I realized how deeply I was longing for someone to see me and to speak to me with kindness. Maybe you have a similar longing. So it's the first day of the church year. Happy New Year to all of you. The church year does not begin on January 1st. It begins on the first day of Advent. We are in this new season. We start the year with this season, like Lent, of waiting and getting ready and looking ahead. In Lent, we are looking ahead to what's called the Paschal Mystery, to Jesus' death and resurrection. In Advent, we are looking forward to the mystery of the Incarnation, to Jesus coming and being among us. When the new year starts, Laura talked about this last week, we always change which gospel we are focusing on. We rotate through Matthew and Mark and Luke, and this year we're spending a year with Mark. Mark, which is the shortest of all the Gospels, which many people reckon is the oldest, which folks who can read ancient Greek tell us is written in the most urgent language, the most rough and ready language. Mark is the book that tells the story of Jesus in English translation using the word immediately over and over again. There's just this pace, this urgency, this excitement about telling Jesus' story. Regardless of which gospel we are in, whether it is Matthew, Mark, or Luke, John coming out for the special occasions, we always begin the new church year with apocalypse. Now that's a kind of a fascinating choice, isn't it, right? Like you're starting a new year, you might think like resolutions, like this is the year I'm going to start jogging. This is the year I'm going to stop eating so many cookies. But no, this is the year that you need to know about apocalypse. This is the thing we always want you to know on New Year's Day. So apocalypse, I think in popular imagination, maybe influenced by some books and movies, is stuff blowing up, is people being sucked into the sky, is Hollywood-level special effects. It's everything ending. And to some extent, that is biblical, particularly if you're drawing on the final book of Scripture, on the book of Revelation, and to a lesser extent, it's biblical if you draw on something like the gospel this morning. Apocalypse really is about ending. But there's a broader meaning to this word. The word that is rendered apocalypse in English is also often rendered as revelation. So depending on what flavor of Bible you have sitting on your bookshelf, the final book may be the Revelation of John, or it may be the Apocalypse of John. That's not because there were multiple editions and John changed his mind about the title partway through. Those are actually just both different translations of the same title. Revelation, therefore, Apocalypse, it has this connotation of discovery, of uncovering, of understanding something in a deep way. Maybe ultimately ending and deep understanding, maybe they're ultimately the same thing, because to deeply understand something, to have this new experience that opens up your world, it's necessarily an ending, isn't it? Think about maybe going away to school. If you went away to college, or you moved away to take a job, you're suddenly sort of trying on these clothes that have the label of adult on them, and like, what does it mean to function in the world without your parents, without the people who raised you? That is a revelation or an apocalypse. Think about if you've had children. Think about the moment when you know the children are coming. I wrote in the Advented Christmas card this year about the experience of bewilderment Phoebe and I had when we learned that our first child was coming. It was welcome news and good news, but it was still revelatory. It was still apocalyptic in nature. Like, our lives were going to change, and change irrevocably. Think maybe about retirement. Retirement for many people is immensely welcome, and it still is this huge change in who you are, this revelatory change. Now you have this different answer to the question you get at cocktail parties. So what do you do? Now you're trying on the answer of retired. All of these are positive. Most of these are positive changes, but there's still ones that end things, that bring a finality to who we were before. Maybe we could call them welcome apocalypses, if that's a category that makes any sense, like a radical ending that we wanted, but it still changes stuff. There's a popular song on the radio, or there was maybe it's out of rotation now. I'm a little behind the times in my pop culture, but there was a popular song on the radio that talks about this kind of revelation. The lyrics go, it's about a kiss between two lovers, and the lyrics go, your lips, my lips, apocalypse, right? I hope all of you have or will have a kiss like that at least once in your life. This is a kiss that changes everything. Oh my God. And while there are welcome apocalypses, there are also many in our lives that are entirely unwelcome. This is revelation that we didn't want, and that changes everything. I shared with you via Grace Notes that my old boss, Duncan, abruptly died 8 days ago. He died on Saturday, miles too young. Hugely shocking death. And I traveled up to BC, to Vancouver Island, to be there for his funeral on Thursday, seeing a lot of colleagues that I hadn't seen in a number of years, and telling stories about Duncan. His death was revelatory in nature. It was apocalyptic in nature. You may have encountered deaths like that. Someone who was a big deal in your life and is suddenly gone. And what is it that's revealed in a moment like that? I mean, any number of things we could point at, but one of the things that's revealed is that life is finite. We often have this sense that we have infinite opportunities to to be with people and say what we want to them and do the things that we want, and we don't. And somehow this is a surprise every single time. Death is like this bedrock reality in life. There's no reality more fundamental or more indisputable than death. And we often wander around saying things like life is short, often followed by like, therefore eat the cheesecake. Life is short, like we know that, and somehow it's surprising to us. When my friend Don was dying, Don, who was like one of the wisest people I ever met, I remember him saying, I didn't understand that life was short. Like we know, but we don't know. And so there is apocalypse in the dying of someone who you loved and who shaped you, in that kind of ending that's not welcome at all. Whenever I'm at a funeral, I'm often thinking about how to carry on the work of the person who died. In church language, that's one of the things that we mean by resurrection. How are we going to continue what that person did, the good stuff that they did, and carry that forward in the world? When Duncan died, I shared on Facebook that he was a great boss. And then I started thinking to myself, I wonder, like, what did I mean when I said that? Like, what is it to be a good boss? And I thought of a few things. The one was that he was immensely passionate about his work, immensely joyous about it, immensely hopeful. This was back when I was in the arts, and he loved the arts. And I have this hypothesis that when a group of leaders are hopeful and joyous and passionate, that radiates through an organization. So that's the thing that was great about him. He was very clear. And actually, a lot of the stories that his friends told in remembering were about the extremity of his clarity. It sounds like there was more than one shouting match that he had with colleagues, and certainly when he was upset with me, there was fire coming out of his ears. But that kind of worked for me. I never uttered the words, I wonder what he's thinking. And that was, in a lot of ways, super helpful. But the big reason he was a great boss, and many of his friends and many of the people who used to work for Duncan talked about this, is that he had people's backs. He was in their corner. I remember in particular, so my job as a technical director was facilitating the backstage elements of shows that came into the Vancouver East Cultural Centre. I would work with the touring production manager, tour manager, whoever, and figure out how to put their show into our venue. And we were mostly working with not-for-profits, but we would occasionally have for-profit rock shows that would come in. And maybe predictably, it was the for-profit rock shows, the shows that were making the most money, that would give us the hardest time about the bill. I don't know, you may have had an experience like that. There's often a correlation between people who can most afford to spend money and who are most reluctant to do so. And I remember a promoter who was really grinding me about our schedule being too long and there sort of being too many staff people. He didn't want to pay that bill. And I was not having any of it because I knew the schedule was correct and safe. So this promoter did something that everyone loves, which he decided to go over my head and call up my boss, call up Duncan, and try to sort of have Duncan overrule me. And I guess Duncan told me about this later. This promoter framed this conversation as, well, we're just having a chat. And Duncan said, he responded after this guy said, we're just having a chat 2 or 3 times. Duncan said to him, I have other things to do, so if we're just chatting, should I hang up? And I was so grateful. I was so grateful when he told me that story. I realized this was a boss who was not going to second guess me, who was not going to overrule me, who was not going to publicly embarrass me. He was in my corner. And maybe that's what I'm wondering about today as we sit with the apocalypse, the unwelcome apocalypse of knowing that life has an ending, that life is short. What would it look like if we had one another's backs? What would it look like if we were in our neighbor's corner? What would it look like if we went through this world saying to the people whom we encounter, you're a good person? Imagine what that would be like. You're a good person being a paraphrase of what the Father says to Jesus in his baptism and later on at the Transfiguration. This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. It's an echo of what Mr. Rogers just said over and over again, isn't it? I like you just the way you are. You're a good person. You are a good person. What would it be like to carry that knowledge and that reassurance through the world? Here is this unwelcome news that life is short. And here is an urgency that we're invited into as a consequence. It's an urgency we're reminded of across the church here in All Souls and All Saints, in Good Friday and Ash Wednesday, these occasions where we remember that we're here just for a while. We often conclude the service, don't we, with that blessing from Henri Emile. Life is short. We do not have long to gladden the hearts of those who walk the way with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. What would it be like if we said yes to that invitation? What kind of new life would grow out of that apocalypse?